So welcome to my vlog, I guess. This is going to be primarily about the newly acquired 64 Volkswagen Beetle. I've had it for about a month. I bought it in mid-December 2018. It was in a city about 3 hours north of where I live. So the story to this car was, the lady I bought it from, apparently it was her grandmother's car. And she was, I believe, the original owner. And she drove it up until the early 70s. And then the story was that she had gotten in an accident and the car was parked. And it never moved again until about a year ago. And the garage that it was parked in was starting to collapse. So they pulled the car out and tarped it up. And it had been sitting outside for a year under a tarp. And they decided they were never going to do anything with it. So they advertised the car. And I happened to find it online. So, brought it home, started looking everything over. And the good parts of this car are really good. And the other parts aren't terrible. So, the story was that she had gotten in an accident and the car was parked then and she wasn't driving anymore. So when I got it, the deck lid was inside and the engine was missing a few parts. The carburetor was gone, the fuel pump was gone, the coil was missing. So I rounded up some parts and I wanted to get this thing just to light up and move on its own power. And that way I didn't have a dead horse laying around, because I hate pushing cars. Once I got the engine to turn over, I did a compression test on it and found out that number 3 had actual 0 compression. So investigating further, we found there's a valve spring stuck and it wouldn't release by tapping it. So I pulled the engine out, put it on a stand, and started disassembling the engine. And what I came to find was number 1 cylinder, number 1 connecting rod, was actually, the bearing was hammered right out of it. So that's kind of the death of the 40 horse as far as I'm concerned. The long-term goal on this car anyways was to have a 15 or a 1600 in it. So I guess that'll be the priority now. Like I say, I won't put any time or money into a 40 horse. So, alright, so let's have a good look at the car. Rust-wise, this thing has 0 rust, which is totally amazing. So in the wheel wells, where typically these cars are always gone, the thing is incredibly nice. The original running boards are still on it, which is amazing. The belief is it sat in that garage 45 years. The last oil change sticker on it was from 1970. So I don't doubt it was parked that long. So yeah, rust-wise, this thing is incredibly solid. I used to have big involvement in Volkswagens when I was a lot younger. And to find one this clean back then, which I'm talking 25, 30 years ago, would have been amazing. So to find one now in this condition is just incredible. The interior is quite nice. There's a few things been messed with. Unfortunately, when the car was parked, they left the battery in it and it had frozen. And all the acid leached out all over the floor. But somehow, miraculously, the floorboards aren't rotted out of it. So they're incredibly sound. There's like 3 little pinholes under where the battery was. And that's it. The other amazing part of this car is somehow, there's some seat covers that were put on it early, somehow mice never got in this car. So the headliner in this thing is mint. Which I'm just totally surprised by. I mean, typically mice will get in any car if it sits about a year, especially once this thing was put outside. The dashboard's quite nice. The fuel gauge, for some reason somebody had taken the bezel off of it, and there's a couple parts of it in the glove box. The needle was missing, so I've got it out and I'm restoring it now. The radio is up on a shelf. I'll show you what came with it. Door panels are incredibly nice, although I'm not sure who would order brown interior with a Java green car. But to see original running boards still on a Beetle is pretty amazing. They also ordered up all the fender trim and everything, I guess, when the car was brand new. This fender and the hood have been replaced off a different car. They're earlier parts. The hood is actually a 4-tab, and when the car was hit, which it was, they put on some used parts and they decided to respray the whole car pretty quick, and they did a real not good job of it, to put it that way. A lot of lacquer primer used. They didn't sand the original paint. It's peeling off, you know, pretty much everywhere. The replacement panels that they used, same thing. The paint, the repaint is just flaking off of it. Same thing there and there. In the middle of the roof. Same thing on this side, the original running board, still there, still in quite nice shape. You can see some corrosion underneath it, but nothing severe. I bought a reproduction mirror and put it on. For whatever reason, somebody had screwed this one onto the door. So hopefully down the line I'll find a nice original clean one, and I'll replace it with that. There's the spare and the jack that was in it. There's also a gas heater which somebody had installed. It wasn't a factory install. The holes were quite butchered up, and it wasn't pretty. And I don't see this car ever being driven in the winter again, so I don't see any reason to run a gas heater. That's the radio that was in it, RCA Victor. Never got it to make any sound. But the dash plate is pretty neat. I don't imagine I'll use it, but it's kind of a neat piece nonetheless. Washer bottle and brake reservoir. So when I got the car home, the first things I started doing was cleaning the car up. Pulled the rubber mats out of the back, pulled the tar board out of the back, and started cleaning up all the white flaky battery acid that had dried up. And the gas tank was about half full of fuel, and it was the most rancid thing I've ever smelled. Pardon me. So yeah, when you really inspect the car, the front end has been in a hit. What's amazing is the hood actually latches from about 2 inches up. So here's another view of the 4-tab hood. You can see the Wolfsburg emblem. They never welded the holes, they just bonded it over. That's some interesting trim clip retention there. And the 4-tab there. So I don't really know what the story is. The fender welting on 3 fenders are painted green, and then the fender welting on this fender is black. So whether the fender was painted off and then they forgot to paint that welting, I'm not sure. But anyway, so on to the bad part of the car, and that's the damage in the front end. And it has been hit pretty good, but not terrible. The damage doesn't really seem to extend beyond there. And then that side has a pretty good buckle in it. The bottom of the spare tire well is quite nice. I mean, once again, there's no rust. Which up here where we use salt on our roads is quite amazing, but I mean, the reasoning to that is the car wasn't on the road for 45, 46 years. So being as how I have a history of auto body and painting, I kind of look at this front end damage and think, you know, there's no reason I would even consider replacing parts here. All this metal is quite nice metal, and it just needs to be brought out properly and put back where it belongs. So I'm going to do that in another video or two, I guess, is where I'll start working out the front end damage, and I'll document that about how I go about doing that. I mean, this is the worst of it, is this side here. It's just crumpled in really good. But hey, the other thing you can kind of notice on the front end is this fender's kind of folded back to meet the apron. And then this one here looks good. But if you get to the side of it, you can see there's a buckle there where they've kind of folded the fender in. So the other bit of damage on this car is the rear, and it is quite minor. The 64 deck lid, it was in the car when I bought it, and at some point it looks like it was on the ground and somebody had stepped on it, which is kind of unfortunate. But I basically took my hand and gave it a smack and it popped out. Not that that's, you know, the final bodywork by any means, but it popped the dent out. You can see on this side here that the rear apron is pushed in a little bit, and that fender there is buckled. Not terrible. The back is quite minor. Nice clean engine compartment. So yeah, the first thing I did is I cleaned the car up. The front brakes were kind of dragging, so I disassembled those, got them, well, took the brakes right out, got new parts to put in, greased the bearings back up, put it back together. My goal was to basically get it to a car wash, give it a good rinse down, and then we'll start the repairs. So there you go. Primarily this vlog will be about working on the old Beetle, but I think as it goes on it'll probably have to do with all kinds of things that have motors and wheels. So hopefully you enjoyed this, and hopefully we see you in another one. Bye.